Since the launch of the DJI Mavic 3, there's been lots of discussion over control method. Today, we'll be confirming what options you have and discuss the all-important cross-compatibility of the original and new smart controllers. At the moment, of course, there is no cross-compatibility. The first gen works with everything OcuSync up to the Air 2S release, and the newest RC Pro only works with the Mavic 3. However, today we're going to be hearing a clip from DJI Chief Pilot Donovan Davis on the subject. We'll also be joined by Ian from MadsTech to discuss the compatibility question and look at why we think DJI won't allow forward compatibility, but give you some hopeful good news about backward compatibility from the DJI RC Pro or Gen 2 smart controller. Hi Ian, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you're well, sir.
I am very good, Sean. I hope you are well too, my friend.
Yes, trying to get over Techtober, which became Tech November as well, which was a bizarre one. Everyone, Techtober's coming. It's like no, it's almost becoming all year round, almost from.
It's overspilling, to say the least. And I think what people don't realize is it does quite take its toll on us as well, having to keep on top of all of this stuff too.
Indeed,
really
especially when DJI decide to launch 3 things in 3 weeks, and such different products as well, with such different controversies and positives and negatives and everything. It's been
a weird launch cycle.
This is an interesting topic, which I know from both of us, we know a lot of people that would love to see the smart controller being forward compatible and backwards compatible, and just buy a smart controller and it will work with everything is what a lot of both hobby and professional users would love to see. So we're going to be talking about the smart controller from the point of view of Gen 1 and Gen 2. So the smart controller and the RC Pro, to give them their marketing names. And first of all, we're going to be looking at a clip from Donovan Davis, who's the chief pilot at DJI. Of course, is involved in lots of developments. He appeared recently on Ready Set Drone's Spin Up show, who's very kindly allowed me to clip this segment, where he talks about whether or not he feels, as someone that's inside the company, of course, has an inside track, whether he feels there will be compatibility either forwards or back. So let's take a look at that clip.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, let's put him on the spot. Is the smart controllers, compatibility-wise, the old smart controller, is that going to be compatible with the new, and is the RC Pro going to be compatible with all of the previous ones?
From what I've heard, the first gen smart controller will not be forward compatible, but the Gen 2, which is this one,
RC Pro?
RC Pro, yes, could potentially be backwards compatible. And if people want that, definitely talk about it on social, send emails to DJI asking for it, because one of the benefits of working at DJI and buying DJI products is that's actually has a huge weight. It carries a huge weight what the public is asking for, as far as DJI headquarters is concerned. So when features are wanted or really sought after, the best thing you can do is talk about it on social and send requests to DJI. So if the backwards compatibility of the RC Pro DJI Smart Controller V2 is something that's wanted, then just everybody ask for it.
So it's technically possible, I suppose.
I mean, it is and it isn't, because the technology that's in the smart controller is what we're calling O3 plus. So that's why you're getting the 15-kilometer range as opposed to the 10-kilometer range with the older smart controller version. So there is different hardware in there, and there's an additional protocol, wireless protocol, other than 2.4 and 5.8 that I can't go into detail about, but that's in the new RC Pro as well.
That gives us at least an opinion of someone within DJI, and I think it's probably one we can trust, because Donovan does know his stuff, and he is very much at the front face of moving products forward and helping products to launch. And I think also it's interesting that it's probably what we would expect, as in the Gen 1, what not can't be moved forward in terms of compatibility, but won't be. And of course, that the RC Pro, being the newer product, has that capability to go back, because of course, one thing we do know is that it is exactly the same controller model number that is being released with the Mavic 3 standard as we all have with our Air 2S. It's the identical controller. So we know for a fact that, and of course we know that the Gen 1 smart controller can control the Air 2S, and therefore if they can make it work with the Air 2S, they could make it work with the Mavic 3. Now, that doesn't mean boo, horror, DJI are terrible. They won't make my old smart controller work with my new Mavic 3, of course, because they may have tried it, and I'm sure somewhere, I'm sure Donovan has flown his Mavic 3 with the Gen 1 controller. But just because they can do something also doesn't necessarily mean they should, of course.
No, and we have seen this. You know, OcuSync is a black art in itself, in the sense of what it is and how it works. And look, for those who don't know, DJI's radio technology over the years has evolved. It started with Lightbridge, and then we had Lightbridge 2, and there's some like 2.5s and what we would call 1.5 and 2.5 in the mix. And then we had OcuSync, which was released with the Mavic Pro, and that was the first time we'd seen this new technology. And the interesting thing at the time was that OcuSync was actually running alongside Lightbridge. They were making two sets of products with two different wireless systems and almost pitting them off against each other. The 4 Pro with Lightbridge 2 and the Mavic with OcuSync. And then DJI then moved everything over to OcuSync. Now, the basis for OcuSync is an SDR. It's a software-based radio. So it is, I'm not going to say off-the-shelf hardware, because that's probably not the right term to use, but it is a more generic hardware rather than an entire custom ASIC that they can then put their software-defined radio over the top. And what that means is they can do things like upgrade it. So, for instance, when the Mavic 2 launched, they upgraded the firmware in the white FPV goggles to support OcuSync 2, because the Mavic 2 was OcuSync 2, the original white goggles was OcuSync 1. Whereas under Lightbridge, those kind of things would be possible. Now, we have seen this happen a few times, and we've now hit what DJI call OcuSync 3 Plus on the Mavic 3. There is actually OcuSync 3 in the middle, and it sort of went under the radar, and that was with the A2S.
Indeed.
And there was quite a bit of confusion around that, because the A2S shipped with the RCN1, which is actually an OcuSync 2 remote, but the drone is OcuSync 3.
Yes.
And everyone sort of looked at this and went, well, what does that mean? And that was never really discovered. No one really, the DJI didn't take that forward. There was no OcuSync 3 controller for that remote.
No,
and in
indeed,
fact, we might have that remote today, which is interesting. If we ever did see backwards compatibility on the RC Pro, it would be on the A2S more than anything else, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Because that would be where it's at. Yes. But what we ended up now with this Mavic 3, which ships with two remotes, which is the RCN1, just like the A2S, which is technically an OcuSync 2 remote. And then we've got the RC Pro, which is OcuSync 3. Now, the bit people sort of get confused over is, well, we have an OcuSync 2 smart controller, and we have an OcuSync 2 RCN1, yet I can't use that one on that, but I can use that one on that. And this is what has led to a lot of the confusion. Now, the original smart controller was sort of the second birth of that device. It came earlier on as Crystal Sky, for those who ever did see it. One of my favorite devices. It really was fantastic for pro use. However, it did have one or two failings, and one of them was it was quite underpowered as a Android device standpoint. I'm not talking about battery life, but the CPU was a lead core based one, and it wasn't the most advanced device at the point of launch. And that then meant it was always one or two steps behind, and it met an end of life fairly quickly after that. Although you can still use it. And for instance, the Crystal Sky didn't have enough power to run 1080p mode on the Inspire 2. Even though it was designed for it. So there were some issues around it, and the HDMI input never came and other stuff like that. Whereas then the smart controller came, and once again, whilst very good at what it was designed to do, it wasn't the most powerful device on the market at the point of release.
Yes,
and there is an argument to be said.
It's always had that weakness as well, hasn't it, really, from the point of view that people were always, hey, oh, great, okay, we've got this smart controller, it runs Android, but it doesn't, it runs on Android. There's a difference between something running Android and running on something.
And running on it,
You know, DJI designed the smart controller to work on the basis of Android, so that obviously, you know, it does reduce production costs, but it gives a trusted platform that they can use, etc. But they were not creating a tablet. They were not creating a tablet that you could download Netflix on and, you know, Drone Assist on and everything else like that. It was a dedicated use item. So I think some of the issues that and some of the weaknesses or perceived weaknesses were because people thought this was something that they could actually use as a tablet as well, because it has Android.
Yes.
But actually, if you left it alone as a smart controller and you left it clean with just the updates and that type of thing, it is a very good, reliable device. It will do the job you want it to do.
Yeah.
But I can see why, even though they could upgrade and could make that device compatible forwards with the Mavic 3, I could see why perhaps they wouldn't want that now older tech to run their newer tech. But why would they? Because they have something new that actually replaces that product. And I think, but beyond the cost side of things, which I completely and utterly understand, it's very, very frustrating that, and some people have only just recently, because they were on sale, of course, purchased the Gen 1 smart controller. And when you have marketing terms like future proof and that type of thing, and that's never going to help people. But so I can see why it's one way and not the other. If you've got the old smart controller, it's only that model that is out of reach at the moment. But if they were able to bring that backwards compatible from the new RC Pro, and of course then you have the Air 2S's and everything else in the family running off it, then I think you could start to see something which would be a very powerful and very popular tool, frankly.
It is. And look, you have to be fair to them. When you design a custom device, you would design it to do what you intend it to do. So putting in future proofing isn't a fair comment to throw at a company, because they don't know what they're going to do in 3 years' time. Now, you could argue, though, you could choose the very best that was available today, especially in a premium accessory, to try and at least give you half a chance.
Yes,
absolutely. Okay, that is a slightly different argument. You've then got the facet of a premium accessory and what the expectation is on users. So, a user is spending $600, $700, $800, as it was on that controller, or pounds, on a premium accessory that they expect to use moving forward. Now, part of this is DJI's maybe short-sightedness in understanding how users would react when it isn't capable, because we're not talking $100, $200 used.
That's right.
We're talking $600, $700. But the third facet is also people not really appreciating the differences in the hardware as well. And as you said earlier, there is technical differences. And whilst you can upgrade the software, there is a point of it will only go so far. And it's easy to make something work to a standard, but is that standard satisfactory for a consumer that is going to use it on a daily basis? Yes. And the example of that is that smart controller on the A2S. There has been well-known comments about it not behaving particularly well, and I haven't tried it myself. I can't comment on that
because which is a very good point, because we don't, as I was saying, we don't know how those tests of the Gen 1 smart controller with the Mavic 3 would have gone. If there's 100 test flights made and there were issues in 40 of those or 50 of those, then that's not something that they're going to allow to move forward and to happen. Yes, again, it's still technically possible, and there's going to be a huge amount of people that already own the Gen 1 smart controller who will say, I don't mind about the shorter range, I don't mind about the odd glitch and this and that and updates being funny, but as a large professional company, as the number one in our sector, they're not going to be happy in terms of releasing that. So we have to look behind it as well, and we almost have to look at it almost damned if they do, damned if they don't, from the point of view that if they did release it and the Mavic 3 and made the existing smart controller 1 compatible with it, and there were lots of glitches and errors and things, then there'd be lots of videos, including probably one from myself, saying, hey, there's lots of problems with this, why did they release it?
Why did they push ahead with it? And I think, from my point of view, if we look at it technically, so you've got OcuSync 3 Plus, which is 1080p, 30 or 60 frames a second, 15 megabits a second data rate. So that's the wireless system. Now, when the Mavic 3 is used with the RC Pro, that's what you get. However, when you use the Mavic 3 with the RCN1, which is the lower one, you actually only get 5.5 megabits a second. So it does have a lower data rate between the remote and the aircraft. And what that will translate into is a reduced quality image. I'm not saying resolution, because you've got to separate resolution and image quality. And what it will look is more blocked, more noise in the image. Now, the smart controller, when used with the Mavic 2, is capable of 1080p 30, not 60. But the Mavic 3 can achieve that up to 12 megabits a second. So it sits somewhere in between. So from a wireless point of view, on paper, it looks compatible. Yes. But it comes down to experience and, frankly, dev time. And that's the one thing people will also have to understand is nothing when you do this is free for a manufacturer. So if you take DJI as a company with infinite resources, we would think, however, everything is cost. So there's always this point of how far do you look back? How far do you say, right, I'm going to dedicate 5 men, 2 months to make that 3-year-old controller compatible?
Yes.
And this is where it comes down to. So they can look at okay, what are the benefits? What are the plus points? What have we had to do to make this new controller work with the drone and all of this? And then they can go, is any of that transferable back? No. Okay, that means we've got to do all of that from scratch. That's 1,000 hours. That's 100 hours. And sorry, but we're not willing to invest in that.
Yeah.
And we can argue with that, and we might not agree with that because all of the users have spent their $600-700 and say, well, I've given you my $700.
Yes.
I want you to do that.
But from a straight product point of view, the Gen 1 smart controller is limited. We all, anybody that's used one knows that. Anyone that's tried to do anything else with it knows that it is limited. It does have its issues. It's a fantastic piece of kit, especially for that price point. Especially when you look at the RC Pro now. Although the RC Pro is fantastic, it does have its limitations, and I think its shelf life, if you look at it in practical terms, its shelf life was coming towards a natural end anyway. And I think that there was already people discussing whether or not we would see a smart controller 2, even before we really believed the Mavic 3 was certainly going to be happening this year or next year. The smart controller 2 was still was already a subject in the community. So it perhaps was something that is perhaps the end of life has been brought forward a little bit because of the Mavic 3, but actually, not that far. Perhaps we would have already been seeing a smart controller 2 next year, even if there wasn't a Mavic 3.
And people do forget the product cycle has been much longer this time around. The Mavic 2 is getting on now. It is a lot further down. I think, I'm disappointed in 2 things on the remote control side of things. Number one, they got rid of this, because this, I think, is a much better remote than the RCN1. I like the fact it had a screen on it. I've used the RCN1, the basic remote, and I would have much preferred. It does feel like they've cheaped out a little bit on the standard remote. Yeah,
I know what you mean. When I first saw the new remote, in the leak photos, etc., back in the Air 2 leaks, I actually wondered if it was a test bed, because it was so big and chunky. I thought, actually, is that remote in someone's bag, and they're showing us, which they shouldn't be showing us, that that's actually a test bed for OcuSync 3 and that type of thing. And so I was skeptical, and I thought, it's big and chunky, I don't like it. I have to say, and it might just be because of these big fat sausage fingers, that might be a very big factor. But I have to say, I actually prefer the new style controller to the one you have in your hands now.
I just would have preferred a bit more bells and whistles. If I'm paying £1,800, in essence, it's the same remote you get with a $400 Mini.
And there's definitely a cost thing. There's definitely a cost-saving thing, 100%. Because again, that controller is not taking the full capabilities of the OcuSync 3 Plus that's available in the Mavic 3. So there's definitely a cost-saving thing. It's
a shame you've lost on that. It didn't provide that.
Could they
just give us something?
Could they perhaps
extra for the money?
1879 release price, which in the UK here, which is I still think is quite a competitive price. Could they have made that a £2,000 release price and had a screen in that controller? And,
that's. It sounds like they've had to cut somewhere, doesn't it? And the remote has been on that package where it has. As
Donovan Davis said in that clip that we played earlier, they are looking for feedback from the public. They do respond to public feedback. So do comment in this video. This is YouTube is social media. We forget that sometimes. So do comment on this video if you want to see cross compatibility. Either way, frankly, I know he said that forward isn't going to happen, but who knows, if enough people ask for it, something might happen. But certainly that backwards compatibility sounds like it might happen, and that, as someone that uses a range of drones, does excite me. So get commenting below. If you're new here, obviously hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications for more updates on this story and everything else drone and tech focused. If you want to know even more stuff about drones and tech, and you like watching people take things apart and putting them back together again for good reason, often soldering things, then you want to go and subscribe to this guy, Ian Madtex.
It's often bad reasons as well, usually because I've broke it.
Yeah, that's right. If you want to see products actually getting used,
if you want me to break, if you want to watch me break them and fix them again,
exactly. And also Ian has a fantastic Sunday evening show, which I always have on in the background when I'm editing and working on a Sunday evening, which is again, it is always fantastic. It still boggles my mind to watch someone soldering something inside some tech live on air. But there we go. That is the uniqueness of the channel. So. But yeah,
we're lucky at times. We get to do some interesting stuff. We need to do more of that, actually.
Yes, indeed.
More fire.
Indeed.
That's what people are
yes.
saying. More fire and soldering.
more sort of NASCAR entertainment, waiting for it to go wrong and burn things, etc. But as I say, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon, sir.
It's a pleasure, as always.